There are moments when something crosses your path and it feels different from everything else you've seen before. Not louder, not more dramatic, just heavier in a quiet way, as if it carries meaning beyond coincidence. This is one of those moments. You didn't arrive here by scrolling randomly or killing time. Something in you paused. Something in you felt the need to listen. That alone is important, because most people move through life on autopilot, ignoring the subtle moments that invite reflection and awareness. When a message truly finds you, it doesn't force itself. It waits for your attention. Life is constantly speaking, but rarely in obvious ways. It speaks through patterns, timing, feelings you can't quite explain, and moments that interrupt your routine just long enough to make you wonder why. This message arrived because you were ready to notice it, not because you are weak, broken, or in danger, but because your awareness is opening. When people say this found you for a reason, they often imagine fate or mystery. In reality, it's about alignment. You are at a point where clarity matters more than distraction, and something inside you knows that. Those who have passed away don't need to speak in words to leave an impact. Their influence lives on in memory, instinct, and the values they help shape inside you. When you feel drawn to a message like this, it's often because something familiar resonates at a deeper level. It feels like recognition rather than surprise. Not fear, but seriousness. Not panic, but attention. That's the difference between random content and something that truly finds you. Michael's energy represents discernment and protection. Not protection from imaginary threats, but protection from drifting too far away from yourself. This message didn't arrive to scare you or predict something dramatic. It arrived to interrupt unconscious movement, to say, pause here. Look at your life honestly. When timing aligns like this, it's often because you've been moving forward while ignoring small inner signals. Signals that say, slow down, or something needs to be addressed, or this doesn't feel right anymore. Many people sense these signals but brush them aside. They tell themselves they are overthinking, being emotional, or imagining things. Over time, ignoring these moments creates distance between who you are and how you are living. When a message like this reaches you, it's because that distance has become noticeable, not dangerous, just significant enough to deserve attention. There's also comfort in this moment, even if it doesn't feel like it at first. Being found by a message means you are not numb. You are still receptive, still capable of reflection, still connected to something deeper than surface-level noise. That is a strength, not a vulnerability. People who are completely lost don't pause. They rush, they distract, they scroll past. You did tea. This message is not telling you that something bad is about to happen. It's reminding you that something important is already happening inside you. A shift in awareness, a quiet readiness to be more honest with yourself, a growing need for clarity instead of constant motion. When someone who once cared deeply about you would warn you, it would be with fear. It would be with concern, steadiness, and a desire to protect your peace before things become heavier. Being found by a message also means you are at a point where small choices matter more than big declaration. You don't need to change everything overnight. You need to notice what you've been overlooking, the habits that drain you, the situations you tolerate out of familiarity, the thoughts you repeat, even though they don't help you anymore. Awareness always comes before change. This moment is a doorway, not a destination. You stepped into it by listening, by staying instead of leaving, by allowing yourself to consider that maybe there is something worth hearing here. That alone tells a story about where you are in your life right now. You are not asleep. You are not disconnected. You are in a phase of quiet recalibration. Messages that truly find us don't demand a leaf. They invite reflection. You don't need to label this moment as spiritual, symbolic, or anything else. All that matters is that it slowed you down enough to pay attention, and attention is the first form of protection. When you are aware, you make better choices. When you are present, you protect yourself without force. This message found you because you are capable of hearing it, because you are ready to look inward without running, because something in you already knew it was time to pause, even if you didn't know why. That's not coincidence. That's awareness meeting the right moment. When people hear the word warning, their mind immediately jumps to fear. They imagine danger, loss, or something going wrong in the future. But the kind of warning being pointed to here is very different. It is not about predicting disaster or creating anxiety. It is about awareness arriving before consequences do. The most meaningful warnings in life are quiet. They don't shout. They gently shift your attention towards something you've been overlooking, not to scare you, but to protect you. Fear-based warnings push people into panic and helplessness. Awareness-based warnings do the opposite. They restore control. They help you see clearly so you can make better decisions. This message is rooted in awareness, not fear. It doesn't tell you that something bad is coming. It invites you to notice what is already present. Often, what causes the most damage in life isn't sudden chaos, but long periods of ignoring what doesn't feel right. Many people continue down paths that quietly exhaust them because nothing feels bad enough to stop. A relationship that drains rather than supports. A routine that leaves no space to breathe. A mindset that constantly pressures instead of guides. These things rarely announce themselves as threats. They wear the disguise of normalcy. The warning here is simply asking you to become aware of where you may be tolerating less than you deserve. Michael's role, symbolically, is not to frighten but to clarify. Clarity is one of the strongest forms of protection. When you see clearly, manipulation loses power. Confusion fades. You stop reacting and start choosing. Fear clouds judgment, but awareness sharpens it. This message is not pushing urgency to create panic. It's creating urgency so you don't keep postponing what needs your attention. Awareness often arrives when your inner and outer lives are slightly out of sync. You may be doing what's expected, what's familiar, or what feels safe, while internally feeling unsettled or restless. That inner tension is not a flaw, it's a signal. Ignoring it doesn't make it disappear, it just grows quieter until it becomes harder to recognize. This message arrives to amplify that signal gently before it turns into burnout, resentment, or regret. Fear says something terrible will happen if you don't act. Awareness says something important is already happening within you. One weakens you, the other empowers you. This is why the message doesn't come with dramatic details or specific threats. It doesn't need to. Its power lies in directing your attention inward where the truth already exists. Sometimes people resist awareness because it requires honesty. It asks you to admit when something isn't working anymore, when a role you've been playing no longer fits. When your energy is being spent in ways that don't align with who you're becoming. Fear distracts you from these realizations. Awareness brings them into focus without judgment. This warning is also about timing, not because time is running out, but because delaying awareness often leads to harder lessons later. Life will eventually force reflection through discomfort if gentle signals are ignored. Becoming aware early allows you to make small, graceful adjustments instead of painful corrections. That is the quiet mercy within the message. Another reason fear is absent here is because you are not powerless. Fear assumes you lack control. Awareness assumes you have agency. You can change direction. You can set boundaries. You can question assumptions you've been living by for years. None of that requires panic. It requires presence. If someone who loved you deeply were able to offer guidance, it would come wrapped in terror. It would come as a calm nudge, reminding you of your strength and your worth. It would say, pay attention now, so you don't have to struggle later. That is the tone of this warning, steady, protective, respectful of your ability to choose. Awareness also helps you separate real concerns from imagined ones. When you are present, you stop reacting to every thought or emotion as if it were an emergency. You observe patterns instead of being controlled by them. This creates emotional safety. Fear scatters your energy. Awareness gathers it. This message doesn't ask you to believe in anything supernatural. It asks you to believe in your capacity to notice, to listen, to pause. The warning is simply this: don't move through this phase of your life unconsciously. Don't ignore what keeps repeating. Don't silence the inner signals just because they are inconvenient. Awareness is not dramatic, but it is powerful. It changes outcomes quietly, protects you not by force, but by understanding. And once you see clearly, you rarely need to be warned again, because clarity becomes your guide. Most signals in life are not loud or dramatic. They don't arrive as clear instructions or undeniable signs. They come as subtle feelings, repeated thoughts, quiet discomfort, or moments where something feels slightly off but easy to ignore. Over time, many people learn to dismiss these signals because they don't seem urgent. They tell themselves they are just tired, stressed, or overthinking. Slowly, ignoring these small messages becomes a habit, and that habit creates distance from inner clarity. You may have felt this in moments where your energy dropped for no obvious reason, or when a situation that once felt fine started to feel heavy. Maybe you noticed hesitation before making certain decisions, or a tight feeling when agreeing to things you didn't truly want. These are not random emotions, they are subtle signals. They are the mind and body communicating before words are needed. Ignoring them doesn't make them wrong, it only makes them quieter. One of the most common reasons people ignore these signals is familiarity. When something has been part of your life for a long time, it feels normal. Even if it's no longer healthy or aligned, you get used to emotional strain. You adapt to imbalance. You convince yourself that discomfort is just part of life. Over time, this normalizes situations that deserve attention. Subtle signals often challenge what's familiar, and familiarity is comfortable even when it's limiting. Another reason signals are ignored is fear of disruption. Listening to inner guidance often means admitting that something needs to change. Change can be inconvenient. It can affect relationships, routines, or plans you've already invested in. So the mind looks for reasons to dismiss the signal. It labels it as doubt, weakness, or imagination. But genuine signals don't disappear just because they're ignored. They repeat, often in slightly different forms. You might notice patterns that keep returning, similar conflicts with different people, the same exhaustion after certain interactions, the same frustration at specific points in your routine. These repetitions are not punishments. They are messages waiting to be acknowledged. Life tends to repeat lessons until awareness catches up. Subtle signals are the earliest version of those lessons. There is also social conditioning that teaches people to override their inner voice. Many are taught to prioritize productivity over well-being, politeness over honesty, and endurance over balance. This creates a disconnect between what you feel and how you act. You learn to function despite discomfort rather than questioning it. Over time, this makes it harder to trust your own signals, even when they're accurate. Ignoring subtle signals doesn't usually lead to immediate consequences. That's why it's easy to continue. But over time, the cost shows up in other ways. Fatigue that doesn't go away with rest. Irritation without a clear cause. A sense of being stuck or disconnected. These are not random states. They are the result of prolonged self-avoidance. The inner system keeps sending messages until it feels heard. The idea here is not that you've failed by ignoring these signals. It's that you're being invited to notice them now. Awareness doesn't judge the past, it redirects the present. You didn't ignore signals because you were careless. You ignored them because you were managing, surviving, adapting. That was useful at one point. It just may not be necessary anymore. Subtle signals are often calm, not urgent. They ask questions rather than give commands. Why does this feel heavy? Why do I feel relieved when this ends? Why do I feel tense before this situation? These questions are not meant to accuse. They are meant to guide. Ignoring them doesn't make you strong. Listening to them makes you wise. There's also a difference between intuition and anxiety, which causes confusion for many people. Anxiety is loud, repetitive, and urgent. It pushes panic and worst-case scenarios. Intuition is quiet, steady, and consistent. It doesn't rush you. It simply points. When you slow down, the difference becomes clearer. Subtle signals don't demand immediate action. They ask for honest attention. Listening to these signals doesn't mean you must act on every feeling. It means you acknowledge them instead of dismissing them. You observe patterns instead of pushing through blindly. You give yourself permission to question what no longer feels aligned. This is not weakness. This is self-respect. The moment you begin to notice subtle signals again, something shifts. You stop forcing yourself into spaces that drain you. You stop explaining away discomfort that deserves reflection. You start making choices that feel lighter, even if they require adjustment. Awareness doesn't decomplicate life, it simplifies it. These signals have always been there. They did disappear when you ignored them. They waited. And now, your attention is turning back toward them, not to overwhelm you, but to guide you gently toward clarity and balance that you may have been postponing without realizing it. Not everything that drains you arrives with conflict or obvious harm. Some of the most exhausting influences in life are quiet, familiar, and socially acceptable. They blend into your routine so smoothly that you stop questioning them. These patterns don't announce themselves as problems. They feel normal. And that is exactly why they can slowly take so much from you without being noticed. Familiar patterns often begin as coping mechanisms or temporary choices. At one point, they may have served a purpose, a habit that helped you feel safe, a role that gave you stability, a relationship dynamic that once felt supportive. Over time, however, growth changes your needs. What once fit begins to feel tight. What once energized you starts to feel heavy. But because these patterns are familiar, you keep them, assuming discomfort is just part of life. Drain doesn't always feel like exhaustion. Sometimes it shows up as lack of motivation, dullness, or emotional numbness. You may notice that certain conversations leave you feeling smaller, even if nothing negative was said. Certain environments leave you restless or tense, even though they seem harmless. Certain routines leave you counting the hours until you can escape, even if they look productive on the surface. These are signs of quiet depletion. One of the reasons these patterns persist is because they don't violate obvious boundaries. There may be no argument, no betrayal, no clear reason to step away. So you tell yourself you should be fine. You tell yourself others have it worse. You rationalize staying in situations that slowly erode your energy because leaving would feel unnecessary or dramatic. But emotional drain doesn't require justification to be real. Another reason familiar patterns are hard to notice is identity attachment. You may have built part of your identity around being dependable, accommodating, or strong. Letting go of draining patterns can feel like letting go of who you think you are. You may fear disappointing others or disrupting expectations. So you stay consistent, even when consistency costs you peace. Routine can also hide depletion. When days repeat, it becomes harder to notice how you actually feel. You function on momentum instead of intention. You wake up, complete tasks, interact with the same people, and repeat. There's no obvious breakdown, so you assume everything is fine. But slowly, joy fades, presence fades, curiosity fades. These losses are subtle, but they matter. Familiar patterns can also include internal habits, not just external ones. Thought loops that criticize you, pressure to constantly improve or prove yourself, guilt when you rest. These patterns drain you just as much as unhealthy environments. Because they happen inside your mind, they're even easier to overlook. You may think that being hard on yourself is normal or necessary. Over time, it becomes exhausting. The danger of quiet drain is not immediate collapse, but long-term disconnection. When energy is constantly leaked in small amounts, there's little left for creativity, reflection, or growth. You may start to feel stuck without knowing why. Not because you lack ability, but because your resources are being quietly depleted by patterns that no longer serve you. Awareness changes this. The moment you begin to question familiar patterns, you reclaim power. You stop assuming that normal means healthy. You start noticing how your body responds to certain people, spaces, and habits. You recognize relief as important information. You allow yourself to acknowledge that something can be comfortable and draining at the same time. Letting go of draining patterns doesn't require dramatic exits. Sometimes it starts with small shifts. Saying no more often, creating pauses, changing how much access others have to your energy, questioning routines instead of blindly following them. These adjustments may feel uncomfortable at first because they disrupt familiarity, but discomfort that leads to clarity is different from discomfort that leads to depletion. This message isn't asking you to reject everything familiar. It's asking you to evaluate it honestly. Familiarity should support growth, not quietly limit it. When patterns no longer align with who you are becoming, holding onto them out of habit costs more than letting them go. Quiet drain thrives on inattention. Once you notice it, it loses power. You begin to choose what deserves your energy instead of giving it away automatically. And that shift, though subtle, creates space for strength, clarity, and a sense of inner stability that no familiar pattern can replace. Many people misunderstand boundaries because they associate them with distance, rejection, or conflict. They imagine boundaries as walls meant to keep others out. In reality, boundaries are not about pushing people away. They are about protecting what matters inside you. Without boundaries, even the strongest person slowly becomes depleted. Protection is not aggression. It is clarity about where your responsibility ends and where another person's begins. For a long time, you may have believed that being available, understanding, and accommodating was the same as being kind. While kindness is valuable, it becomes harmful when it requires you to constantly ignore your own limits. When you repeatedly override your needs to maintain harmony, the cost shows up internally. Resentment grows quietly. Energy fades. You begin to feel unseen, not because others intend harm, but because you never clearly showed where you stand. True protection begins with self-awareness. You cannot set boundaries if you don't recognize when something crosses them. That recognition often appears as discomfort, tightness in the chest, fatigue after certain interactions, irritation that feels out of proportion. These reactions are not flaws, they are signals. They tell you where your limits are being tested. Ignoring them does to make you generous. It makes you unprotected. Boundaries are an act of strength because they require honesty. You must admit when something is too much, even if you've tolerated it for a long time. You must accept that others may not immediately understand or approve. That can feel risky, especially if you've built your identity around being dependable or easygoing. But strength is not measured by how much you can endure. It is measured by how well you preserve your integrity. Many people fear that setting boundaries will make them seem selfish or ungrateful. This fear often comes from early conditioning, where approval was earned through compliance. Over time, this teaches you to prioritize external comfort over internal balance. But boundaries are not punishments. They are guidelines. They tell others how to interact with you in a way that respects both sides. Protection through boundaries also applies internally. You may need boundaries with your own thoughts, replaying past mistakes endlessly, taking responsibility for things beyond your control, holding yourself to impossible standards. These internal patterns drain you just as much as external pressures. Learning to interrupt them is a form of self-protection that strengthens emotional stability. Boundaries don't need to be loud or confrontational. Often they are quiet decisions you make consistently, choosing not to engage in draining conversations, limiting how much emotional labor you provide without reciprocity, allowing silence instead of filling every gap with explanation. These choices communicate clarity without conflict. It's also important to understand that people who benefit from your lack of boundaries may resist when you begin to set them. This resistance doesn't mean you are wrong. It means the dynamic is changing. Protection often feels uncomfortable at first because it disrupts patterns that others have grown used to. Over time, healthy boundaries attract healthier interactions. Setting boundaries doesn't mean you stop caring. It means you care enough about yourself to preserve your capacity to care for others. Without boundaries, care turns into obligation. With boundaries, care becomes a choice, and choice is what keeps compassion sustainable. Protection is not about controlling others. You cannot control how people react, behave, or feel. What you can control is your response. You can decide how much access someone has to your time, energy, and emotional space. That decision is where your power lies. When boundaries are clear, something shifts internally. You feel more grounded, less reactive, more present. You stop bracing yourself in interactions. You stop feeling guilty for needing rest or space. This inner calm is not weakness, it is stability. This message reminds you that protection doesn't arrive from outside. It begins with self-respect expressed through boundaries. When you honor your limits, you don't become smaller, you become steadier. And from that steadiness, real strength emerges, quiet, confident, and deeply protective of the life you are building. Many people grow up believing that strength means handling everything alone. They learn, sometimes early, that asking for help is a sign of weakness and that silence equals resilience. Over time, this belief becomes automatic. You carry stress privately, process pain internally, and push forward without pause. On the surface, this looks like strength. Beneath it, however, is often exhaustion and isolation that goes unnoticed because it has become familiar. Carrying everything alone does make challenges disappear. It simply hides them. Emotions that aren't expressed don't vanish, they settle. They show up later as tension, irritability, or numbness. When you believe you must be self-contained at all times, you deny yourself the relief that comes from shared understanding. Human beings are not designed to process everything in isolation. Connection is not a luxury, it is a stabilizer. One reason people cling to silent strength is fear of being misunderstood. It can feel safer to keep things to yourself than to risk explaining feelings that may be minimized or judged. Past experiences of being dismissed or told to be strong can reinforce the habit of emotional self-reliance. Over time, you stop reaching out, not because you don't need support, but because you don't expect it. Another reason is responsibility. You may feel that others already carry enough, and that adding your burden would be unfair. This belief often comes from empathy, but it turns inward as self-neglect. You become the one who listens, supports, and holds space for others while rarely allowing the same for yourself. Strength then becomes one-sided, and imbalance slowly builds. True strength is not about isolation. It is about discernment, knowing when to hold steady and when to release, knowing when you can manage alone and when shared perspective would bring clarity. Allowing yourself to be seen does not make you fragile. It makes you honest. Honesty reduces internal pressure. Releasing the belief that you must carry everything alone doesn't mean oversharing or depending on others for every decision. It means recognizing that support can take many forms. A conversation that lightens your mental load. Writing your thoughts instead of suppressing them. Taking time to reflect instead of pushing through. Strength includes rest and reflection, not just endurance. There is also strength in admitting uncertainty. You don't have to have everything figured out to move forward. Pretending certainty often creates more stress than acknowledging confusion. When you allow yourself to say, even privately, "This is heavy," or "I need a pause," you create space for recalibration. That pause is not weakness, it is maintenance. Many people fear that if they stop holding everything together, things will fall apart. In reality, constantly holding everything together often prevents growth. When you loosen your grip, you allow for adjustment. You allow new insights to emerge. You allow solutions that aren't forced. The idea that strength equals solitude often comes from survival, not wisdom. At some point, being self-reliant may have been necessary. It kept you moving. It kept you functional. But what once helped you survive may now be limiting your ability to thrive. Strength evolves. What was once endurance becomes awareness. Letting go of silent strength also means changing how you talk to yourself. You may need to stop criticizing yourself for feeling tired, overwhelmed, or uncertain. These feelings are not failures, they are signals that something needs attention. Treating them with respect restores balance. There is a quiet relief that comes when you stop carrying everything alone. Even internally, you feel lighter without anything external changing. That lightness comes from permission to be human, permission to pause, permission to acknowledge weight without shame. This message reminds you that strength is not measured by how much you endure in silence. It is measured by how well you care for yourself while facing challenges. You don't lose strength by releasing the need to carry everything alone. You reclaim it. There are moments in life that don't announce themselves as major turning points, yet quietly shape everything that follows. They don't arrive with dramatic events or sudden endings. Instead, they appear as a sense of pause, reflection, or subtle discomfort that asks for your attention. This is one of those moments. You may not feel like you are standing at a crossroads, but small choices made now carry more weight than they seem. A subtle turning point is easy to miss because nothing feels urgent on the surface. You may still be functioning, meeting responsibilities and maintaining routines. From the outside, everything appears stable. Internally, however, there may be a growing sense that something needs to shift, not because things are broken, but because you've outgrown certain patterns. This internal awareness is often the first sign that you are moving into a new phase. Turning points don't always require dramatic change. Often they ask for refinement, a different way of responding, a new boundary, a shift in focus. These adjustments may seem minor, but over time they redirect the course of your life. Choosing awareness over avoidance, clarity over habit, or rest over constant effort sets a new direction quietly. One of the challenges of subtle turning points is that they demand responsibility without external pressure. When life forces change through crisis, action feels unavoidable. When change arrives gently, you must choose it deliberately. This can be uncomfortable because it removes excuses. You can no longer blame circumstances alone. You are invited to participate consciously in shaping what comes next. At this point, ignoring what you sense does to lead to immediate consequences. That's why it's tempting to postpone. You can continue as you are for a while, but subtle turning points are like small adjustments in direction while traveling. A slight shift now prevents a much larger correction later. Awareness now reduces struggle later. You may notice that certain decisions feel heavier than before. Not because they are harder, but because they matter more. How you spend your energy, who you allow access to your time, which thoughts you entertain. These choices shape your emotional environment. Over time, they influence confidence, peace, and direction. This turning point is also about alignment. When your actions align with your inner values, life feels steadier. When they don't, tension builds quietly. You may feel restless without knowing why. This restlessness is not a problem to fix. It is information. It tells you that something in your life is asking to be adjusted, not endured. Another sign of a subtle turning point is increased sensitivity. You may find that you're less tolerant of situations you once accepted easily. This is not regression, it's refinement. As awareness grows, tolerance for misalignment decreases. What once felt manageable now feels draining. This is not weakness, it is clarity sharpening. Small choices made now often revolve around honesty. Being honest about what you need, about what you no longer want to carry, about what you're ready to let go of. These truths don't require immediate action, but they do require acknowledgement. Denying them prolongs discomfort. Recognizing them opens options. A subtle turning point doesn't demand perfection, it asks for intention. You don't need to know the full path ahead. You only need to notice what direction feels lighter and what direction feels heavier. Lightness doesn't mean ease, it means alignment. Heaviness doesn't mean difficulty, it often means resistance to growth. This moment is less about changing your life and more about choosing how you move forward. Will you continue automatically, or will you engage with awareness? Will you listen to what's been quietly surfacing, or will you drown it out with routine? These questions shape outcomes more than any dramatic event. The power of this turning point lies in its subtlety. No one else needs to see it for it to matter. The shift happens internally first. When you respond with awareness, your future becomes steadier, clearer, and more intentional. And that is how meaningful change often begins quietly, at a moment when you choose to pay attention. Living a life where you feel both protected and powerful begins with understanding that these qualities are not dependent on external circumstances. Protection does not come from avoiding challenges or isolating yourself from difficulties. Power does not come from dominating others or forcing control over every outcome. True protection is the ability to maintain inner stability and clarity even in the face of uncertainty, and true power is the capacity to act decisively and intentionally while remaining aligned with your values and priorities. Archangel Michael's energy as a symbol of guidance, clarity, and strength represents the combination of these qualities, reminding you that you can navigate life with calm authority and confidence while remaining fully human. The first step toward living protected and powerful is awareness. Awareness of your surroundings, of your interactions, and of the subtle ways that energy flows in and out of your life is critical. You must notice the situations, people, and habits that uplift you versus those that drain you. Being present allows you to identify when your boundaries are being tested, when your energy is being depleted, or when you are unconsciously reacting instead of acting intentionally. Protection begins with this kind of awareness. Power grows from the clarity it provides. When you know where your limits lie and what truly serves your growth, you can act with both precision and confidence. Boundaries are central to protection. Setting them does not mean rejecting others. It means honoring your own energy, time, and focus. When you protect your inner space, you create a stable environment from which you can operate effectively. You are no longer reacting impulsively to the demands, expectations, or opinions of others. Instead, your actions are deliberate and measured. Boundaries reinforce self-respect, and in doing so, cultivate inner strength. The energy you preserve through protection is the same energy that fuels your power to act decisively when needed. Power, when understood correctly, is not about force or aggression. It is about alignment with your principles and clarity of purpose. Every decision you make, every step you take, carries more authority when it is rooted in awareness and integrity. Power emerges naturally when you act from a place of preparation and discernment rather than impulsivity. You become capable of handling challenges without fear because your confidence is grounded in the knowledge that you are guided by wisdom, intuition, and clarity. This is the essence of Michael's energy strength coupled with discernment. Living protected and powerful also requires resilience. Life is unpredictable, and challenges are inevitable. Protection does not guarantee a life without difficulty, and power does not make obstacles disappear. What they do provide is the ability to face challenges without losing your center. Resilience is built when you consistently make choices that safeguard your energy and reinforce your principles. Every time you navigate difficulties without sacrificing your integrity or allowing fear to dictate your actions, your sense of protection and power strengthens. An essential aspect of this process is discernment, the ability to separate what matters from what does not. Not every challenge demands your energy, and not every opinion or expectation requires your compliance. Discernment allows you to allocate your time, focus, and effort toward what truly contributes to your growth and well-being. It also enables you to disengage from negativity, manipulation, or situations that subtly undermine your confidence. The more you practice discernment, the more naturally your protection and power reinforce each other. Another key element is trust in yourself and trust in the guidance that surrounds you. Life can feel uncertain, and sometimes fear creeps in, convincing you that you are unprepared or unsupported. Protection comes from trusting that your boundaries, awareness, and intuition are reliable. Power comes from trusting that you have the ability to act with clarity and purpose when the moment requires it. Together, trust, awareness, and discernment create a foundation that allows you to navigate life confidently. Living protected and powerful also means integrating your experiences. Past lessons, successes, and even failures are resources that enhance your ability to respond wisely in the present. Reflection on these experiences strengthens your internal guidance system, helping you recognize patterns, avoid unnecessary risks, and approach decisions with informed clarity. Protection comes from understanding what has worked and what has not. Power comes from applying that understanding in real time with authority. Finally, the combination of protection and power enables you to operate from a place of calm confidence. You no longer feel the need to prove yourself constantly or react to every external stimulus. Your energy is directed intentionally, your boundaries respected, and your actions aligned with purpose. Challenges may still arise, but you meet them with a grounded presence, knowing that your internal strength, guided by discernment and awareness, is sufficient to handle whatever comes. This integration creates a life where you are both secure and empowered, capable of facing uncertainty without fear and navigating opportunity without hesitation. When these qualities are fully embraced, every decision, every interaction, and every choice becomes a reflection of inner strength, a demonstration of resilience, and an expression of the guidance and clarity that have always been available to you.